I always compare like my gender to like gymnastics.
There's no way that you can express yourself that will invalidate your gender.
There is no agreeing to disagree when it's literally someone's life that is on the line.
All right, Kaya, now we've got to move on to everybody's favorite part of the show where we react to woke insanity and woke TikToks and try to restore a little bit of sanity to this conversation over LGBT issues because the far left is really driving us off a cliff. Up first, we've got someone who, this clip is extremely viral on YouTube, you know, going out to probably millions of young people, explaining and laughing about how funny it is that they don't even understand or know their own gender identity. Take a look.
Wait, when did you come out as, are you gender fluid or non-binary?
I usually just say non-binary. Like if I think to, I always compare like my gender to like gymnastics because it's like, you know how like some gymnasts get a mental block and then they physically can't do a trick?
Yeah.
I feel like whenever I start to ponder over my like gender identity,
yeah.
I just can't.
Yeah.
Like if I think about it too hard, I just get way too confused and like way too overwhelmed and then I just can't. So I just exist.
Yeah.
And then I usually just say like any pronouns are fine and people are like, but what do you like really? And I'm like, I don't know.
Ha ha, funny story, shut the hell up. I don't know. Sorry.
That's how it feels on the inside, but I'm not confrontational, so I'm like, it's really fine. Like I really don't know. Like it's okay.
I don't know what it is, guys.
Yeah.
So I find it just slightly depressing that so many impressionable young people are like looking at somebody who's confused and doesn't even know what their own gender is as an influencer or a role model or like it's cute or funny. I genuinely feel bad for this person. I imagine it must be distressing to not know to wake up and not know what gender you feel like. I mean, this person is a female, so just for the record, but I'm also concerned that this is the kind of content that is glorified and kind of looked at as funny and cool among young people now. And that concerns me that it might cause imitation or copycatting or subconscious being drawn towards similar types of behavior. Because we see that in every other aspect of psychology, but yet not in this one thing, we're told.
Yeah. And yeah, totally agree with the copycatting. I mean, this was basically how I felt when I identified as non-binary. Like, I couldn't really explain it or understand it myself. And when I tried to think about it, I would get a headache and I would stop because I didn't even know what it was myself. So I think that this is for people who actually do identify as a lot of these, you know, genders. This is the reality of how it is. You're just confused all the time because you can't explain this thing that you're trying so hard to defend and this thing that you're trying to get other people to use your pronouns, but you don't even know why you want to use those pronouns because it's all about, you know, this weird social credit and not really about anything having to do with you or who you are. And so you can't explain it. But it is very sad to see this person, you know, go through this. And I know that so many other people are as well.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency to like mock these people or whatever, but I honestly most of the time feel kind of sympathy for them because they're hopelessly confused and that can't be fun.
Yeah, it is very, very confusing and yeah, it definitely deserves a lot of sympathy.
So the other thing too, though, is one of the reasons I think the non-binary thing is met with so much pushback and is not being widely adopted yet. And like, if you walk on the street and you ask people like non-binary, they look at you like it's being adopted in like media and academia and even like business that's gone woke and stuff. But I don't think the broad population is ever going to fully buy into this. And it's a good example of, I think, the distinction between the new like LGBTQI2 plus activism and like old school gay rights activism, because they're trying to abolish gender and abolish sex as we know it, basically. And that requires taking something from other people about how they identify and how they understand the world and forcing them to redefine it. Whereas like the original gay rights fight was like, well, we want to also be able to get married or like also have partner visitation in the hospital or also be able to adopt children. But like, I almost, so the way that, for example, like non-binary activists will relabel things like chest feeders instead of breast feeders or say that's the proper term or this kind of thing. It's almost like if during the fight for gay marriage, they had said that we want gay marriage and also from now on heterosexual couples need to say spouse instead of husband and wife because in our marriages there's two husbands or two wives. It's like that kind of thing where their activism is taking or subtracting from other people. It's not just asking to be included. It's not just live and let live.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the gay rights movement was very, leave us alone, let us do our thing. We don't want to bother you, you don't want to bother us, let's just coexist. Right? And now it's, with all this gender stuff, it's not leave us alone, right? It's you actively have to participate in everything that we're doing, and you have to, like I said, use all the language we want to use and everything. And yeah, I think the fact that, I mean, we're seeing this new separation now, the LGB walking away from the T, and yeah, it seems like part of that is because the OG LGBs, don't want don't want their, leave me alone, just let me get married, to be clumped into all of this other stuff that has nothing to do with, the original fighting for just equal protection under the law and being able to just live your life.
Well, Kaya, did you know that homophobia is literally murder? That's what this next TikToker said when discussing the recent tragic murder of someone named O'Shea Sibley. Take a look and a listen to this interesting perspective.
Your homophobia is killing people. It is killing people. O'Shea Sibley was dancing. He was voguing. He was simply just existing as a gay black man enjoying life, and he was murdered because of it. Homophobic slurs were thrown at him, and he was stabbed to death because he was dancing. Y'all are raising murderers. Your bigotry is murder. There is no agreeing to disagree when it's literally someone's life that is on the line. You cannot agree to disagree whether someone deserves to exist. It is murder. Homophobia is murder.
So, Kaya, that TikTok has almost 2 million views. So this message is getting out to millions of young people. And of course, I think it goes without saying that this murder, and which is allegedly a hate crime, is horrific, right? And if this accused person really did stab somebody because of they thought they were dancing in a gay way or whatever, that's like horrifying and evil. And I think almost everyone would agree. And so that aspect of this is uncontroversial. But what I found very distasteful and gross about this is the attempt to essentially like push the blame, which belongs on the alleged murderer, and then say it's like, well, anyone who's ever said anything homophobic, by which they define that very broadly, like ever disagreed with gay marriage, homophobic, ever, disagreed with trans and kids, homophobic. That these types of TikTokers define that to mean just about any form of dissent. You're actually essentially letting the killer or alleged killer off the hook and saying their actions aren't really all their fault. It's also really the fault of all these other people for saying bad things I don't like. I find that element of it very disturbing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the idea that any person who has ever thought a bad thing or said a bad thing about, a gay person is the equivalent of a murderer is insane. Now, homophobia is wrong. It is bad. I think we should both be on the same page about that. But yeah, there's this whole words are violence and thoughts are violence, narrative that comes from the left, that anytime that you say something that they disagree with or think something that is mean or something that is bad, that is the equivalent of harming someone, is how you get so many people who are afraid to speak what they want to say or to think certain things. There is a way to end homophobia, and there is a way to, decrease the amount of irrational bigotry that we have in this country, but it's not telling anyone who you disagree with or anyone who says something bad that they're a murderer or that they're hurting people, because that's just not true, and that's not going to convince anybody because it's not true.
Yeah, and I also hate this idea of there is no agree to disagree. There is no debate over another person's right to exist. Nobody, with the exception of maybe some really fringe, evil people out there somewhere, is saying gay people don't have a right to exist, or trans people don't exist or don't have a right to exist. Nobody is saying that. And so to caricature the debate over different issues, whether it's like I'm sure this person would say that it's homophobic to argue that the cake baker shouldn't have to bake the cake, right? And to try to take like the complex legal or societal debates that are still ongoing over these issues and simplify it all to, there is no debate, it's my truth, you have no right to question my existence, is to me a very illiberal way that they're trying to silence a conversation they're afraid they can't win if it's had openly and honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's their whole broad use of this term homophobia that includes everything from refusing to bake a cake to murder, and then trying to, like you said before, trying to clump everybody as if these are the two same things. That, yeah.
And I literally say this as somebody who's experienced a lot of homophobia from like far right, from groypers. Like, I've probably had thousands of times people call me slurs or like say horrible things about me because I'm gay and they're homophobic. And like, it's not super mainstream on the right or anything, but there are very online factions who are still very homophobic. And so I've borne the brunt of that. I've also been like chased by homeless people because I was holding hands with a guy or something. Like, I've had horrifying experiences with this. And to be clear, like, my experiences are a fraction of some of the people I know. I know people who've been disowned by their families, who went through conversion therapy. It's like, I've been in most ways very lucky. But so even though I still have experienced a good bit of homophobia, and so I say all this as somebody who's not like sympathetic towards real homophobia, but I'm very disturbed by this attempt to use the smokescreen of bigotry to just shut down debates. Because if there's one thing, like, think of applying that to other issues. I'm sure, and I'm not taking any position on the underlying merits. I'm using this as an example. I'm sure that this TikToker and the other people who advance this kind of notion are pro-choice. But that would be like pro-life people saying, there is no debate. This is someone else's right to exist. Clearly they wouldn't accept that, and they wouldn't want that applied to them. But they're attempting to do that to other people. All right, up next, this isn't a TikTok, but it's a tweet that I just had to discuss because I found it really funny, honestly. Let me read this to you, Kaya, and you let me know on a scale of 1 to 10, how high on your bullshit meter does this ring? A woman named Kellen Henneford tweeted, "Breaking my Twitter silence to let y'all know, my femme-presenting ass was denied service at a bar in Manhattan because I was visibly gay. I'm safe. I'm fine. But if it's happening to me in New York City, it's happening everywhere. Your queer friends need your solidarity." 1 to 10, Kaya. How fake is this?
Definitely a 10. What does your femme presenting but also visibly gay? What does that even mean?
And community notes added the context that this person is married to a man.
That sounds about right.
But also, like, she could be bisexual, I guess, right? Like, obviously that's a thing. But what does this mean to be visibly gay? Were you making out with a woman? I assume not, because you're married to a man. But also, like, I'm sorry. It's giving Jussie Smollett when you say you were thrown out of a bar in Manhattan for being gay.
Yeah, can I also, this is just a personal thing, but as a fairly feminine bisexual woman who has been in a relationship with men, if you're in a heterosexual relationship and you're complaining about, like, people treating you differently because you're gay, what does, like, that makes no sense to me. I hate when bisexual people in het relationships constantly talk about how gay they are. Like, you're not dealing with homophobia if you're in a heterosexual relationship. That's a me thing. Even if she is bi, I think that calling herself visibly gay makes absolutely no sense.
I just want to know how are you visible? Are you wearing a t-shirt that says I'm bisexual? Like, but it is funny how often people post like obviously fake anecdotes to Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, you can get a lot of attention and clout, and outrage is what the algorithm favors. So if you're just trying to build yourself up as someone, especially someone in this specific sphere where being a victim is going to get you a lot of clout, coming out and saying somebody committed a hate crime against me is how you build that audience and how you get people to kind of let their guard down and trust everything that you say. So,
I mean, I keep going back to Jussie Smollett for a reason, right? The black actor who staged a fake hate crime and said that people in Chicago beat him up and said, this is MAGA country, or some sort of similarly absurd thing that people instantly were like, huh? A lot of people didn't accept that it was fake because they're like, why would someone make something like that up? But I actually think it's the inevitable result of a culture that treats victimhood as a form of currency, which I think we really increasingly do.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said earlier, this is also like one of the reasons why some people are identifying as some of these genders, is because having these oppression points or these victimhood points makes it so that you can like distract from these other things that the left says are make you like a bad person, like being white or being a man or something else. If you have these victimhood points or these oppression points, your voice becomes more valuable. So of course people are going to make up, different identities or different situations. They're going to increase those, as you said, the social currency of victimhood.
I think there's that aspect of it. I think there's one other aspect, which is that if you can convince yourself that you are marginalized, then your failures in life are no longer your fault. You have someone to blame them on. And I think there's a lot of people in this world who aren't happy with their life. And in some ways, it's due to extraneous factors, but in some ways, the problem is you, right? It's in the mirror. And yet, but it's much easier to not accept that and to decide that you must be horribly oppressed from systemic racism, or you must be horribly oppressed by a NB-phobic society or something, like, which that's a word I didn't even know until recently. NB-phobic. That means like hateful towards non-binary people. But I think that's part of what's behind it as well. So up next, this one was really interesting to me because I think the debate over youth gender transition in medicine is complicated and nuanced. And I don't support kids transitioning. But I have a lot of compassion for parents who have made that choice because they were told by doctors, do this or your kid will unalive themselves. And yet, I think doctors have failed to warn parents about the lack of research supporting these treatments, the very serious potential side effects to things like puberty blockers. And yet, some woke parents apparently don't want that. They don't want their doctor to inform them of these things. Take a listen to this next TikTok, which I found very jarring.
I took my trans daughter to see her pediatrician for the first time since she has come out as trans. I called ahead to give them a heads up, and they assured me everything would be okay. When I got there, it was not okay. When we brought up the subject of puberty blockers, which we were just asking for information at this point, the doctor said, "Oh, I do not have any trans patients and I don't know anything about that." But then proceeded to ask questions such as, have you researched people who regret transitioning? No, I haven't. Because that's not really my concern right now. My concern is to make sure my child doesn't turn into a statistic and unalive herself because she's not being loved and validated. So we're finding a new doctor.
So the text overlaid over this video for audio listeners says, trigger warning, transphobia. Kaya, did I miss it? Did I fall asleep for a second and miss the transphobia part?
No, you did not. Nowhere in this video was there transphobia.
So all the doctor did was say, have you thought about detransitioners? Or like, have you considered the risks and benefits of this possible approach? This person's like, transphobic, new doctor. And I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I see this stuff.
What I find so interesting is that the reason why was she said she doesn't want her child to become a statistic, but there are detransitioning statistics as well. And apparently she's not afraid of those statistics.
And detransitioners find their experience very harmful to their mental health.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's not strong evidence and studies behind this idea that going through with medical transition from your kids will save them from potential terrible outcomes. There's just not strong evidence, but that's something they should want their doctor to discuss with them. Also, like puberty blockers, which they're asking for, can have very serious health side effects. But it sounds like this person just wants to go with this program and wants a doctor that will go along with their ideology, not engage in actual medicine.
I can't imagine being a parent and wanting to put your child through any sort of operation or medical treatment and saying, no, I don't want to know what could go wrong. Just do it. Like, as an adult, I want to know everything, you know? Even if my doctor gives me an aspirin, I'm like, all right, what are the side effects? Like, what's going to happen to me? I can't imagine being a parent and saying, don't tell me. If things go wrong, I don't want to know. Like that, I can't imagine that. I have a lot of sympathy for parents who are going through this, but I can't imagine. There's a difference between, I think, the parents who are being told by doctors or being misled by doctors and being told that there are no side effects, and parents who are purposefully trying to keep information from themselves.
It's really alarming stuff. And it's just like the tip of the iceberg. I keep hearing from parents when I discuss the doctor elements. They keep messaging me on Facebook, on email, or whatever, and telling me, yeah, my doctor asked my 6-year-old if they're a boy or a girl. I had one parent email me and show me correspondence with the doctor and actually say, like, I brought my daughter into the doctor. We said she and her. There was no question about their gender identity. And yet the doctor asked, are you a boy or a girl? And then this little girl was crying in the car afterwards saying, Dad, do I look like a boy? Do I dress like a boy? Is there something wrong with me? Like they were very upset by this. And it was totally unnecessary because if you have a kid with true gender dysphoria from a very young age, they will tell you. You don't need to go to them and ask them. They will tell you, right? Like this, or it will be very obvious. And so I worry about this. There's been some really interesting reporting about the infection of, for lack of a better word, wokeness into medicine. And it's hard to know how pervasive it is because, like, this stuff, I have a personal connection to the medical system, and a lot of it isn't like that. But you hear horror stories about where it is, and it's very hard. We don't have data on, like, how popular the kind of woke approach to medicine is or is becoming. But I think the trajectory is clear. It's clearly getting more woke, not less. And that's really concerning to me.
There is no way that you can express yourself that will invalidate your gender. Expression and gender are two very different things, and you can wear whatever you'd like. You can have your hair however you'd like. You can wear makeup if you would like, and you don't have to if you don't want to. There are no rules. You get to make up your own of how you express yourself personally. And also what your hobbies are and what makes you feel like the most you. You are valid in your gender simply because you are. And you exist this way.
So, simultaneously, you're like, this person is non-binary, I believe. You're non-binary because you don't identify with being a man or a woman, which is all these things like, you know, these masculine things and these feminine things, but also you can be any gender and have anything. You can be a woman with a beard. You can be a woman who, you know, only wears men's clothing, anything. Is it me or does it not make sense?
Well, we discussed this a little bit earlier, right? How they say, you know, oh, gender is anything and everything, and if you can be non-binary, and it's just a feeling. And I think that part of this starts with their definition of the word gender. If you ask people who are in this space what they mean by gender, much like with non-binary or demigender or Jupiter gender, they can't explain it. What they'll say is something like either, oh, it's a feeling, or what they really mean is like, it's your personality. Or what they'll say is like, oh, it's so complicated and so beyond like your understanding as a mere mortal that you need to have all of this understanding of like intersectional gender feminist studies to understand like what gender is. The problem with the fact that no one can explain any of these words, and even let's go down this logic for a little bit. All of these words, they're so complicated and so hard to understand that you need a PhD in intersectional gender studies to understand them. Because that's how it usually gets explained to me. If that's the case, then how is it that, you know, anyone is expected to understand any of
But
this?
also a
Then we're
child can
supposed-
know
we
their
should-
gender. And you,
Yeah, how can a child know their gender? A child does not have a PhD in intersectional gender studies. If you need the understand, like, if this is the equivalent of trying to explain nuclear physics to someone, to describe any of these words, then we should all be asking questions and we should all be thoroughly trying to research and understand these things. And this idea that, yeah, a 6 or 5-year-old can understand their gender is just impossible. We should be questioning those kids, like, maybe you're confusing, you know, gender with something else, because you will never be able to fully understand it until you've taken 10 years of gender studies. So it can either be one or the other. Either gender is, and non-binary and all of these things are so simple that a 6-year-old can understand it, in which case it should be easy to explain to everyone in the population what these words mean, or everyone should be questioning it because it's too complicated for anyone to understand, and we should all be very confused, and that's normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so everyone knows I'm not a Matt Walsh fan. I think he has a lot of bad takes. But What is a Woman, his documentary, was well done because it simply used the Socratic method of asking top people in the fields of gender medicine and gender studies a very simple question: what is a woman? And they could not answer it. And not only could they not answer it, they got very angry at him for daring to ask that question. And I think that is deeply revealing. But I also think that it's concerning to me as a gay man and as somebody who generally wants freedom and tolerance for all people, that this kind of just insane gobbledygook, incoherent nonsense is being tied to our acceptance and our rights. Like, that is if in order to accept gay equality, you also must buy into that, what we just showed you, then gay equality is in trouble. It's not going to be here for long. And so I'm pretty alarmed by this radical nonsense that's kind of infected and infiltrated in this community.